Onassis Foundation. Dublab.
Welcome to the Quarantine Tapes, a daily podcast from Onassis LA and Dublab. Hosted by Paul Holdengräber, this series chronicles shifting paradigms in the era of social distancing.
Hello.
Hello, could I please speak with Nadya Tolokonnikova?
Yeah, that's me.
Hello, Nadya. This is Paul Holdengräber, calling you from the Quarantine Tapes.
Of course.
Tell me, where do I find you at the present time?
I don't talk about my geographic location for safety reasons.
I thought you might say that, but maybe you can answer this question. How have you been spending this time, these past 5 months of the pandemic?
I was reading a lot, studying, catching up on political science, and just trying to understand what's happening with the world. And I was recording a lot. I almost finished working on Pussy Riot's first studio album. And filmed a couple of music videos, by myself with my boyfriend, with who I am spending the quarantine.
And you've been reading a lot. Can you tell me what have you been reading that really stuck with you? From the last few books, it's definitely Naomi Klein, The Green New Deal. I love Naomi's writings, and yes.
I'm preparing right now a video for my Russian subscribers about climate change. Unfortunately, this issue is so-called controversial for whatever reason in Russia, though I don't see anything controversial. I mean, the facts are really speaking for themselves. But the propaganda machine is portraying climate issue as not an important one. And so, I just want to counteract it with my video. So I'm making research, and Naomi Klein's book is really powerful on this issue.
And aside from Naomi Klein, is there something else that might, I don't know if it's console you, but keep you company during these very strange, tumultuous times?
I've been reading Mark Fisher, who is writing about capitalism. His book is called Capitalist Realism, with a subhead "Is there no alternative?" And it's about us starting to perceive capitalism as the only one possible future for us. And just generally, I've been reading a bunch of books that help me to imagine alternative futures. Like, for example, like how would green socialist future look like? How would more feminist future look like? Because I think we're just totally fine with living in the present moment. Like today, right? Not thinking that much about what will happen in 10 or 20 years from now on. So Mark Fisher is an amazing one. What else? Noam Chomsky. I was mostly listening to his interviews and lectures, and Slavoj Žižek. Enjoyed his books a lot.
Have you read his recent book on the pandemic?
No, but I have it in my Kindle. It's on my list. I haven't read it yet, but I've heard him talking about this book.
Now, you grew up in the industrial city of, and forgive me if I pronounce this incorrectly, Norilsk.
Totally right.
With my accent, I can manage many others. During this pandemic, as you know, Trump's Environmental Protection Agency has lifted an enormous number of regulations, opening the door to rampant pollution of waterways and the atmosphere. Can you speak a little bit about the environmental conditions in your hometown now, what you hear about them?
It hardly is getting any better because the leadership in my country did not change. Imagine having Trump for the last 20 years. That's how we Russians feel like. And Putin could not care less about pollution or about warming the planet. Growing up, I was seeing snow in my home city being black. And then, so environmental issues became first issues that I was concerned with as a kid, and feminism as well. But yeah, environmental issues were really pressing. But it's still like that, and honestly, just becoming worse because they're still exploiting the same factories, the same machines as were created or were constructed in the Soviet Union. So the problem with this savage capitalist oligarchs, who are in charge of everything in Russia right now, they don't want to invest any money in infrastructure, including factories, and so they just want to extract profits and bring it somewhere else. They don't really spend money in Russia. They live outside of Russia. They live in Switzerland. They live in Italy. So they just use my country as a machine for extracting profits. So it's getting worse because all the infrastructure is eroding. So the recent spill of oil in Norilsk just showed to the whole world things that are happening on a daily basis. Because people are dying, miners are dying, but it's unfortunately so normalized it doesn't even surprise anyone in my home city.
I mean, reading about your childhood there and how you were able to survive that extraordinary level of pollution, I was very curious, if things had in any form or fashion changed, but it sounds like not at all. Do you think they've gotten worse?
I think yes, because the people who are in charge of my city, they don't spend any money on improving conditions. They just keep using the same machines. Like, let's say it was bought and I don't know the name of those machines, but like let's say machine X was bought created in 1988. So since that time, they never invested money into improving this.
Right.
And I've seen the same problem happening on a smaller scale, but in my penal colony, where I spent 1 year in one particular colony. I spent 2 years in jail, but 1 year in this particular colony where they were using slave labor system. So the same thing was happening there. They don't care about working conditions. They don't care about improving sewing machines. So we had to produce polythene uniforms, and we didn't have details to fix our own sewing machines. So we had to cut our hands working on machines that were broken. So there's the same thing happening in my home city currently.
Nadya, you've said that corporations, especially those that use natural resources, cannot exist without social control. Every one of us must have the ability, you say, to verify exactly what happens in these corporate empires, and every one of us must have the ability to affect what we find there. How do you think, or how can everyday people take back control from those corporations? And do you have a strategy to recommend to activists now working in America?
Well, this is a big question. It's not like I've accomplished that already in Russia, and I came here to States to help you to to take back control. Yeah, but well, information is a big tool that all of us can use, and building your own alternative real system of information, informing your fellow citizens about what's happening is really, really important tool. And after they've been released from jail in 2014, we built this organization that's called Media Zona. It's a media outlet that we manage by ourselves, and we fund it by ourselves. And right now, a big part of this organization is funded by the people. We started crowdfunding 3 years ago, and it's growing really fast. It shows that people are thirsty for real, not fake news, and that actually gives me hope. And we write about a lot about protest actions, about activism, and in particular about environmental activism.
In the early days of Pussy Riot, you said at one of your rallies, "Only when politics meets culture is something interesting born." I'm wondering if you remember saying that, first of all, and what that might mean to you now.
I don't remember the exact moment when I said it, but I guess I was I was saying something similar a million times because what I don't know because for me personally,
Yes.
politics and culture, they always coexist together, and I never knew how to answer the question. What comes first, politics or art? They're to me like nebulous trips. I don't press all the cultural workers to be necessarily political if they are aware of the political conditions and the way how they affect their art, and if they're aware of the political context, and if they decide consciously they don't want to make any political statements, that's okay. But I really don't appreciate artists and any cultural workers. They are closing their eyes on the political context where they live, if they want it or not. And to me, art, personally, it doesn't mean that it has to be like that for everyone. I think there is beauty in us being different, right? To me personally, art is always about questioning status quo. And that's why I see a lot of beautiful potential on the intersection between politics and art.
You worked a little bit with Banksy, am I right?
We participated in his Disneyland art project. Yeah,
That must have been exciting.
yeah, it was amazing. Actually, it happened because of a 7-year-old kid who was a friend of ours and our supporter, and she was studying with another kid who happened to be a kid of Banksy's collaborator. And so, because of this 7-year-old feminist, we ended up working with Banksy, not with him personally. We never seen him, but we had an honor to participate in his project.
Someday I hope to be able to speak with him, even if the voice be distorted and the location be concealed. This moment now where we're using more and more the phone, which used to be so exotic, now has become so much part of our life. It's quite extraordinary how these modes of conviviality now mean something again. Now, I read somewhere that you have been influenced or have had there's been an impact on the way you see and think about the world through the ideas of someone like Guy Debord, who may have informed your views on art and activism. If that is correct, how so? Because the situationist always mattered to me as well.
Well, I wouldn't say that Guy Debord was among the top 10 of influencers on me and Pussy Riot, but for sure, his ideas, they affected the art scene, like radical art scene in Russia, and through that, we were affected as well.
If he wasn't among the top 10, who were the top 3?
It would be a Russian writer, Vladimir Sorokin.
Right.
Yeah, he's a conceptualist, I would say. He works since 80s, and to me, he's the biggest living Russian writer who will be as known in history books as Pushkin. Right now, he's known as a controversial figure because he's not scared to write about stuff that's uncomfortable, but he was totally someone who informed me, because I read his book when I was 13 years old, and the book was called Norm. And in one chapter of this book, he's talking about the society that it's everyone in this society that looks exactly like Soviet state in his descriptions of the society in the novel, and they have to eat this brown brick every day that does not taste well, and you have to absolutely have to eat this brick every day. And people are coming up with, their own methods how to eat the brick. Some people eat it with eggs. Some people just, chew it really quickly and try to not to notice the taste. And in the end of the story, you realize that this brick is actually a piece of shit that everyone in society has to eat. Otherwise, they will be arrested. So, yeah, I was 13 years old and I read it and I was like, whoa, this is absolutely amazing. I actually realized that art can be dangerous. And I think, ultimately, Guy Debord is about the same thing, right? Like he's saying that art should not be spectacle. It should not be like performance. Protest doesn't have to be just performative. It has to be really dangerous. So I learned it from Sarah, and who would be definitely top one. Because before I thought that art is something that we are reading in our history books, and something from the past. It's normal. It's like it's not dangerous. It cannot change anything in our lives, because that is how they teach you in school about art.
But you feel differently about it now.
Yeah, since 13 years old, when I read him and I came across another person from Russian conceptual art scene. His name is Dmitry Alexandrovich Prigov.
Yeah,
and he was not, openly political, but he would always talk about social issues in a way that nobody talks. I haven't seen anyone like that when I was 14 or 13. So these guys, and who would be the third one? I didn't even know. Maybe it would be.
It's okay. I don't.
I think it would be Judith Butler.
Who's this?
Judith Butler.
Right.
American theorist. She teaches in Berkeley now.
Tell me, did you ever actually feel any discomfort about the enthusiastic embrace Pussy Riot received from American officials, be they politicians or journalists? Did you ever feel like you were being perhaps even used in a larger geopolitical game?
Yeah, I remember the moments when we were in Washington talking in front of the U.S. Senate about Russian political prisoners, and we were told that Senator McCain wants to meet us, and it was really interesting. It was tempting because it's interesting to meet people, even though they have completely different views, but we had to reject that offer because it felt to us that it might be not so, honest from him. There have been a couple of the offers like this that we had to reject because we felt like we might be used for some, basically for some informational wars that exist in this old Cold War paradigm, which means that all the dissidents from ex-Soviet Union, they are our friends, which is, really really far from reality, because our views and views of Senator McCain cannot be more different. Yeah, and at the same time, when we were talking at the United States Senate for Russian political prisoners, we were trying to subvert this situation when we can be used. We were talking as well about Cecily McMillan, who was at the time in jail. She's an activist of Occupy Wall Street, and she elbowed a supposedly she elbowed a policeman when he was arresting her. He grabbed her by her breast, and she ended up in Rikers Island in New York. So we did talk about Russian political prisoners, but also we said, hey, look, you're having your own political prisoners, and that's definitely not something that senators really wanted to hear, but that's what we said, because we are anarchists and we showed solidarity to the people like us all around the world, and people like us are progressive leftists and anarchists.
So would you would call yourself at this moment an anarchist?
Yeah, absolutely, since childhood.
Since 7 years old when you read that book, but I'm wondering what that word means to you now, because you're not 7 years old, and we find ourselves in such a volatile moment. And I'm curious how you see the space of anarchy functioning, perhaps even productively at this moment.
I'm not really big at definitions, honestly. It's more about spirit. It's about spirit of fighting with the oppressive state, and at the same time trying to use the most from the state while it exists. Most of the time we just get, or we're just being oppressed by the state, but it demands so much from us. It rarely gives us something back. So to me, it's about holding them accountable and asking to help us instead of oppressing us. And ultimately, anarchism is about building your own alternative structures that are not dependent on anything mainstream, and relying more and more on them. DIY ethics, self-governing and big, strong sense of community.
You know, I wonder how influenced you are. You spoke about a number of different thinkers, but how influenced you are by some American thinkers. I noticed, for instance, in your most recent song, a lyric from your new song that says, "Your silence won't protect you." And if I recall correctly, that's a direct quotation of the poet Audre Lorde.
I had no idea, honestly.
Well, it's you see, these things circulate, and I just was wondering what that sentence might have meant to you when you used it.
Well, it meant that when they arrest you, they tell that your silence will protect you, but it doesn't necessarily protect you all the time when you just prefer to be silent. And authoritarian regimes are consolidating. You see your friends being killed by the right-wing paramilitary. I think this is the moment when your silence will not protect you.
Nadya, in closing, sadly, in creating Pussy Riot, you employed a very conscious publicity strategy to get the attention, perhaps, of the global media. Can you speak a little bit about that, nearly retrospectively? And also, have you ever had any regrets about that?
About what?
About the way in which so much of the Pussy Riot moment, as it were, was a publicity stunt as seen by some.
Well, we gained most of the attention when we were in prison, so we didn't really control that. But I don't regret going to prison because I stood for what I believe in. But before, I wouldn't say we were really popular before. We were interviewed here and there, but I don't know. I feel like our government is in charge of bringing lots of publicity to us, and I don't really feel like it was a really smart move of Putin to put us in jail, because in the end of the story, that move was something that gave us attention and gave us platform in the end of the story that we still use against him.
Do you think that there's some of the strategies that we used then, some of those PR strategies that might be actually helpful for this moment, for the uprising really that's happening in the United States?
Well, it really helps to be clear about your goals and sometimes I'm not clear about my goals. Sometimes I'm stupid, but mostly I'm trying to write simple statements when I interact with the press, and I'm just giving them points of what I'm demanding from my government right now. What whether it's releasing political prisoners or changing government policies. Just trying to be really simple, laconic, and not laconic, but laconic.
Yeah, no, I understood.
Yeah, well, I feel like American activists, honestly, they're making a great job, and at the moment, I'm learning from them.
Right.
So I don't really feel like I'm in a position to preach or teach them.
Right.
Yeah.
How does in closing, how does a term like defund the police resonate with you?
It resonates really well. Russia has an incredible amount of police per capita. We don't need so many people watching us. What are we doing? The problem with the police is that nobody really trusts them, and the more they travel around the world, well, not currently, but normally when it's not COVID, the more they travel, the more I see that in almost all the countries, people don't really trust the police. And when something happens, we call our friends. We don't call the police more often. So it means that the whole system, the whole police system has to be restructured. Maybe it should be even called somehow differently. Maybe they should be replaced by social workers. Because this distrust and this fear of the police is, unfortunately, it's global. And it's, I don't think we should waste our money on funding something that doesn't help us.
Well, Nadya, it's been good to talk to you. Stay safe.
Thank you so much.
And thank you so much for taking this call, and all the very best to you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
To support this show and Dublab's progressive programming, go to dublab.com/support.